Hello, gorgeous seekers, and welcome to Moon Magic, the second installment of this eclipse season, the bookend to a really joyful, hopeful, vibrant, Jupiterian, expansive, warm new moon solar eclipse. We are now matching it with doing some, you guessed it, shadow work and tapping into where we feel discomfort and growth, where our fear voice wants to hold us in old patterns, and also on a collective level, this is a moon where we check in with how we self-nurture and therefore how we are able to stand up to power and advocate for those who need nurturing and support more in our culture. So there's a lot going on here with this full moon lunar eclipse. And it is hitting into some really tender energy, regardless of if you have Cancerian or Capricorn energy in your chart. This is hitting into some really tender points. The moon rules Cancer, so she's at home in Cancer, feeling quite luminous, quite sensitive, quite tender, quite loving, and yet she is getting challenged. I mean, stared down by the sheer amount of energy in Capricorn, almost all of it directly opposing her. And it's kind of a really, I'm getting goosebumps as I'm talking about this, because you think about the Cancer moon, you know, I think about this beautiful goddess, right? Like this just super powerful, like almost like too beautiful to even put into words, but like, you know, has this power of awe. When people look at her, you know, she's just there, so clear and strong. And that's the thing, there's like this misunderstanding with Cancerian energy that it's weak and it's sensitive and it's soft and yeah, it is, it's sensitive, it's soft, but that's not weakness. You know, that's like the most empowering, powerful energy we have in so many ways. And most of us have been taught to push that away, repress it, put it in the background in the name of being pulled together, getting your things done, being on top of it, making sure that you're productive. And that has had huge consequences for our culture as a whole for several centuries. But moon in Cancer, that is that goddess energy. And we're talking about almost terrifying in her power, right? Because it is so immediate, it is so apparent. And I just imagine that entity, that energy sitting there staring across at the sun and Mercury and Saturn and Pluto and even Jupiter, and just saying, yeah, what do you got to show me? What could possibly wear me down? Now, let's just go through the logistics of this moon and what's going on so you have all the info. So this is a lunar eclipse. So the moon's getting blotted out and then visible again. It's happening on the night of, well, it's happening January 10th to the 11th. It goes exact 11:21 Pacific time, but of course that will be different for everybody. It's going to be visible in a lot of places, actually. A lot of Africa, Europe, Asia, and Australia are all going to get at least a part of this this lunar eclipse and the beauty of it. So that's exciting for those of you who are any of those parts of the world. I'm going to be in North America during that time, so I will not get to see it, but I will be writing this with you because this is all hitting on my natal Venus. So Moon is at 20 degrees of Cancer. She's over there being awe-inspiring and beautiful and luminous. The Sun is at 20 degrees of Capricorn. Mercury is conjunct the Sun at 20 degrees of Capricorn. So Sun and Mercury are out there being bold and loud and talkative, and they're opposing the Moon. And that's not necessarily like those are pretty. There's a very vocal energy there. And Mercury being conjunct with the Sun there, this is really powerful energy for reworking our fairy tales and mythologies about ourselves. Mercury is the messenger, right? And the storyteller. Weaves stories, weaves different levels of consciousness together. And so when he's actively engaging with Moon and an eclipse like this, It means this, and eclipses clear something out and open something out. They really close stuff out, even more than a normal full moon would. This moon is really asking for completion, close out, conclusion. So Mercury is there saying, what stories do you want to tell? And what's going to happen here, and it's because of some other placements we haven't gotten to, is the part of you that wants to tell the scary story is going to be very loud. It's throwing a little hissy fit in the face of the moon goddess. And that's the way I want you to think about it. I don't want you to let that old scary story be any bigger than something that you can laugh at. And I know that is easier said than done at times, but part of the reason that's happening is that Saturn and Pluto are going through their conjunction. It goes exact around the 12th of January, but it's one of those, because these are outer planets, their conjunctions last several days, and so by the time we're hitting into this moon, Saturn and Pluto are conjunct at 22 degrees, so they are very close to Sun and Mercury. That's a lot going on in a very tiny window, right? There's 4 planets facing off against the moon in Cancer. And it's an eclipse. So there's this, the symbolism of this is just kind of wildly beautiful, because like the fact that Saturn and Pluto want to get in on this bandwagon is so amazing. Saturn is at home in Capricorn. The moon is at home in Cancer. These planets are in their true essence nature empowered here, and they are having a face-off between the paternal need for structure and security in the way we move through the world, and making sure we have time management, we have practical skills, we have practical realization of what we need to get done, and the moon who says it matters how we feel. It matters how we emotively connect to the process. And both of those things are true. That's the thing. It's not that either one is better or that either one has more value. We need both. We need the dreaminess and the connectiveness of the magic of the moon. I mean, I'll admit, I think that's a little more important. But if we don't have the anchoring of that Saturn and Capricorn energy that has us focus in, build roots, show up, try, learn via experience, what's the point of being here? We're not even doing anything at that point. So that conversation is really potent. But of course, as soon as you tie in Pluto there, what we're doing here is we are really, really getting down to these impulses that we build in ourselves. When we feel obsessive about something, when we want to have control over something, when we are worried about not being enough, all the shadow voices are getting dredged up with that 4-part conjunction in Capricorn. Sun, Mercury, Saturn, and Pluto. And that's why Mercury right now, in the context of this conversation, may be very vocal when it comes to the stories that are scary. Those Plutonian underworld shadow side stories that are the stories of things are scary, there's not enough for everyone. You should hoard what you can. You should hold on. Even though Pluto is a planet of transformation, because it's a very complex underworld energy, it's also where we're most afraid to let go and where we want to have power over those things that we actually do not have power over, and we're not being asked to have power over it. But here's the thing, that is causing us to choose love, joy, and nurturing in that full moon energy over the shadow voice. And while this eclipse is happening, what's going to be happening is it's what Martha Beck describes as the ring of fire. Symbolically, and this is something that is expressed in Dante's Inferno, and not just in the Inferno, in the whole arc from the Inferno through the Purgatory into Paradise. That whole arc is about going to the scariest place, the darkest place within ourselves, and that being the way through to our joy and to our happiness, and that we cannot skip it. And this is the ring of fire. So the things that we want to avoid, those places of ourselves that feel unworthy, that feel scared, those places in ourselves that have a heaviness or a fear or an obsessiveness, they need to be acknowledged. We cannot divert our path away from them. So this eclipse, while it's happening, is almost like a few hours of us going through the scariest parts of who we've been. The parts of ourselves that say, if you expand in this way, you are going to be injured, you're going to be abandoned, you are going to be left behind, you are going to die, and there's going to be nothing left after that. Any scary story you have of yourself are going to be coming up, and it's like almost just like a funhouse horror movie, pop-up of these narratives. And here's the thing, the eclipse will come and go, and the moon will still be there in Cancer, illuminating the sky and saying, what do you got for me? And that is the power, right? If you watch those old stories popping up trying to hold you safe, because if you watched my eclipse video for the new moon eclipse in Cancer, or in Capricorn, that was all about the buoyancy, the joy, the creativity, very Jupiterian, very playful. And so we've grown shape, we've changed frequency. So this is the show, and I was mentioning at the end of that once you change shape and frequency, any frequency that doesn't match anymore gets flushed out. And when it gets flushed out, it has a final resistance where it tries to scare you back into a lower frequency again. And this is all really neurologically and physically. A lot of this has to do with our physical body and where we wired ourselves to stay safe. And so our bodies can have actual physical symptoms of fight or flight kind of energy moving through them. Now that's really complex, and I'm not, certified to like solve that for you, right? And depending on what traumas you've had in life and what you've experienced, that can be a range of levels. But that is the kind of stuff that's coming up for this moon. And this eclipse specifically. And so we've changed frequency, we've grown, we are seeing these old vestiges of anything that's trying to hold us back and keep us safe. It's trying to keep us safe from destruction, right? But it's not actually doing that. So we can watch these stories flare up. We can watch these past versions of stuff flare up. You may have really vivid dreams during the few days around this full moon, and as well just while Saturn and Pluto are doing their dance for about a week, you may be really feeling this as well. All of that can be coming up for you. And that's okay. Let them come up. Just witness them. This is actually a great moon just as a strategy. If you are feeling like those scary stories are really loud, or you're struggling with them a little bit because you're like, what's reality and what's this story? Because sometimes that's the thing. They're very sneaky at making it seem like this is reality. There's a few resources I can give you. One is Byron Katie's, I think her website is called The Work, and there is a worksheet that she has on there called Judge Your Neighbor, I think is what it's called, but you can use it instead of on another person, the worksheet, you can use it on your thoughts. And her whole process is to question your thoughts. Are they real or not? So that's one tool if you're wanting to really get in there and take it apart, because most thoughts are things we just create. They're not actually certifiably, you can know this, right? The other thing you can do is you can let that scary story voice out on paper. Now that seems like you'd be buying into the scary story voice by writing it down, right? Like, oh, well, I'm amplifying it by writing it down. No, I only want to say positive things. I'm just going to keep saying the positive things that I was saying during that other eclipse, and I'm just going to ignore this other darker voice. No, you're not buying into it by writing it down, but what you are doing is you're showing the ridiculousness of it. Because often the stories that are going through our minds, they seem really scary when they're just in our thoughts. When you put them on paper, you not only see that they have very limited viability, but also you have a lot more compassion for that part of the voice. Now this can be really intimate. I've done this before when I've had moments in life where that voice was very loud, and I let it rip on the page. I let all those terrible things I was saying or believing, those terrible stories, out on the page. I just let it go for like 3 pages. And what happened is, of course, I cried a lot. I felt a lot of emotion. I felt very, very sad. But the thing is, I felt so much compassion for myself. I saw the way that those stories and those words were so painful and so mean to this kind, lovely, warm person that I am. And And I felt compassion for the voice that felt it necessary to say such scary things. I felt compassion for the part of me that was afraid. And you know what? That's going through the ring of fire. That is going to your shadow work. That is going to those places that are so important to acknowledge. And this moon is giving us all of the tools to do that. You know, those people that don't take the time to do that shadow work, that can transmute into really interesting places in life. A lot of times people then obsess about amassing a lot of wealth or a lot of power, of wielding power, of staying safe via these mechanisms in the real world that actually just isolate them and cause distortion. And so this moon is inviting all of us to have compassion for these voices and to have release in them. And there is a certain level of a death of self. And you're having to let go of what pretends to be safety equipment, but is really a stranglehold on you, right? And so this is really important, and it could feel like a part of you has died. I don't want to sound too dramatic, but it could feel as though a vision of yourself, a version of your story has died and left you. Now that creates the space for all that good stuff you've been thinking about and culminating during the December eclipse into this coming year. It really creates the space for that frequency that you have now up-leveled into to continue to grow and lead you forward into the next phase. Now, the other part of this I just want to tap into before we pull any cards is this whole thing about this moon also being symbolic about us advocating for our sensitive, loving, nurturing, beautiful side, the goddess, the moon goddess in us, right? The moon knowledge in us. This is like the ultimate secret energetic energy the moon in Cancer is. It is about our deepest, truest power, which is the nurturing, which is the loving, which is the frequency of warmth and safety and belonging and an emotive truth. If we give that gift to ourselves, guess what? We're going to do amazing things in our communities. We're going to do amazing things for those who need our help because we're coming from that frequency. And this moon is demanding that of us, to stare down the power systems that are about control and amassing wealth and having things around us to make us feel safe. We don't need things around us to make us feel safe. We need to feel safe inside of ourselves first, and then to feel safe in sharing of our gifts and sharing of our energy to those who need our help. Because we're not all at our best form 100% of our lives. In fact, part of the learning here is that we are all going to have the lower rung at some point. And in having the lower rung, we are actually on the most spiritual part of our journey. But when we are not on the lower rung, we are therefore needing to check in with how we can share of our beauty, right? So this moon is it's doing a lot, and it's very fitting for what 2020 is bringing. It is setting us up for those of us who are those nurturing, loving people. I'm a Venus and Cancer person myself. I am a very sensitive person. I know a lot of you are, and most people are. This is our call to action to make 2020 not only a year of our own personal jubilant joy and growth, but also to really show up. We need that medicine in the world more than anything else, and this moon is a real initiation into that. This eclipse season is a real initiation into that. Knight of Swords. So Knight of Swords is very much that Mercury energy, right? That energy of, I'm going to put a whole bunch of words out there and see what happens. It's very go-getter, right? Mercury moves very quickly. Stories move very quickly. So, that fastness, that speed, that intensity you may be feeling. Temperance. Deep wisdom. Change of perspective. Transmutation. Alchemy. These are all the words that come up with temperance, right? Temperance isn't about rushing. And actually, interesting, and Two of Wands. Oh, I love these three cards. So, you have the fast-witted Knight of Swords, just rushing in. Here's a story, here's a story, here's a communication, here's a text, here's an email, here's something that seems true, here's something that I'm saying or thinking. And temperance, the ancient wisdom, the timeless wisdom, the bird's eye view, this is an angel at the river of life, is saying, hold up, let's take that element here and let's look at it. Let's change our perspective. Let's temper it. Let's create a new format. Let's create a new story. Let's create a new identity. And if you do that, the world is open to you. The world is open to you. And there is a big reminder here that there is enough love for everyone. There is enough caring and belonging for everyone. There are answers. There is a solution out there for things. There is hope. And we are allowed to choose those things. Time and again, it's not selfish. It's self-full. It's not empty. It's not asking too much. I just want to take a moment to thank you all for this journey the last few years, and thank you for being here with me at the beginning of 2020 and this really powerful time. I think this is I know that I am showing up that much more deeply to this energy of that moon energy, right? Facing up against all of those dark shadows, and not only showing compassion for those dark shadows, but then also opening up and illuminating. And I think it's going to be a really powerful year for that. I am so excited to be on this journey with you and see where it takes all of us, and to open up this energy more and more and more. Be gentle with yourselves. If this moon feels like too much and you just can't tell what reality is, which can kind of happen for a couple of days, just try your best to just get back to basics for a couple of days. Make your movement slow and soft. Don't put pressure on yourself. Instead, slow down and soften. Use the wisdom of the moon. The moon is about hidden magic. It's about the way we tap into frequency and the way that we tap into the unseen before we see it in the physical. And therefore, many of you may find you really have to slow down. You have to tap into moon logic in order to make it through this. It's a really powerful eclipse season. We're kind of finishing up our work with the Cancer-Capricorn axis. We're getting to those last degrees of the North Node in Cancer. It's going to start moving its way to Gemini this year, and we'll have a whole other range of emotions to start tapping in with us. So this eclipse season is really giving us some of our final lessons with this axis, with this wisdom. So take it in, nurture yourselves. I love you so much. If you haven't joined me on Patreon, I would love to see you over there. I'm adding new stuff all the time, including personal reports from me about my life and what I'm going through and my own personal journey with some of this. I may even do a follow-up for eclipse season and just see how everybody experienced that. I'm curious to see how I'm going to experience it because, like I said, that moon is hitting right onto my natal Venus, so which is in my 7th house. So it's going to be personal. Cancer-Capricorn is a very personal axis for me. So I'm curious to see what it's going to do for me as far as death of self and death of one story and beginning of another. I'd love to check in with you on Patreon. So if you haven't joined me, I'd love to see you. If you have, oh my gosh, I love you so much. Thank you for supporting me. It means the world. You can also find me on my website, sarahverba.com, or on Instagram, @SarahVerba. And I'm wearing PinkLune. This crown is everything. Speaking of moon wisdom, she made this crown with that inspiration in mind, and I love it so much. And of course, I have my citrine here. So go check her out. She's got all sorts of beautiful goodies on her Etsy shop, things she hand makes and designs herself. It's just so beautiful. I'm sending you all so much love for the beginning of this new year, and I will see you for more moons ahead now that we've sailed through eclipse season. Sending you all my love.